I'm Sagar Beroshi. I'm a principal narrative designer at the Chinese Room. I have previously been a producer on As Dusk Falls. I was a deputy game director on Helldivers 2. But now I'm doing narrative for Still Wakes the Deep, Siren's Rest. What I do at the Chinese Room is I do narrative for our games. And shortly after joining, my responsibility was explore what options might exist for another story in the Still Wakes the Deep universe. The Still Wakes the Deep has a story. It has a beginning, has a middle, and it very much has an end. So it's not the most straightforward pitch to give. Where would you go with the story? What would be interesting to do? So long before Still Wakes the Deep itself actually released, we spent a lot of time with the core Still Wakes the Deep dev team huddling about what we could do, what parts of the story had yet to be explored, or had potential that we didn't have time to explore, that we couldn't fit in the base game. And we debated and we explored loads and loads of different directions, but the final direction that we all felt strongest about was to go down into the sea, better understand the North Sea itself as a menace, as a threat, as a thing where humans do not belong and where something below might be stirring. That excited us. So that's how we began the process that eventually led to Still Wakes the Deep, Siren's Rest. I joined the Chinese Room in early 2024, and we were just getting to the ending point of Still Wakes the Deep. Still Wakes the Deep was coming to its final stages. It was going to be releasing that June. Everyone was really, really excited. And I came in relatively new, actually. And I had this opportunity. I had an opportunity to sort of talk to all the different devs, almost interview them, almost get a sense of what worked for them about the project, what they were excited for fans to see. And then not terribly long afterwards, we got to release the game and see what the reaction actually was. And so just seeing that cycle, being just a little bit of an outsider, I really enjoyed that because it meant that when it came time to working on a title like Siren's Rest, I had a bit more of an ability to be detached. Anytime you work on a game project, you are so in the weeds. You cannot help but imbue it into your very soul, right? Every part of the game, the characters, the scenes, you start to live and you breathe them, sometimes too intensely. And so to be able to come at it a little bit fresh meant that when it came time to coming up with what the story would be, what the world would be, what the experience would be for Siren's Rest, we were able to look really widely. So it was very much not just me. We worked with a really wide team of people who'd worked on the base game and beyond. But we had a really nice dedicated team, people who really understood the universe, had spent years building the Beroshi, who all had lessons, right? So anytime you go through a project, you always have to end up inventing so much. And you often end up coming to answer a question, solve a problem that you are sure is full of extra potential, but you sometimes run out of time to fulfill that potential. And so when you have the opportunity to do an expansion, to do an extra chapter, to sort of build out the world a little bit, you start to get itchy because you're like, that's what I want to be working on. I want to be showing our community, our audience, a part of this world that maybe we weren't quite able to get into the base game or it didn't quite make sense thematically. And maybe do it in a more focused, in a different type of story. And so I would say it was from a behind the scenes perspective, it was from those types of seeds that we arrived at Siren's Rest. When we released Still Wakes the Deep, we were hoping that people would enjoy it the way that we enjoyed it. But sometimes you spend so many years working on a project, you start to have a bit of uncertainty. Will people see in it what we see in it? And especially when you do an attempt at something authentic, an attempt at something researched, an attempt, therefore, at something specific. This is a specific culture at a specific time in the real world, so to speak. You wonder, will people who are not from that environment, will they also see what we like about it? And we were a really international team that was working on that game. And we all loved it, but would fans, would players also like it? And so when the game came out, we were overjoyed. People did love it. People who came from very different experiences found something that they liked about Still Wakes the Deep. And the different things that they found, you never quite know what it is that they'll latch onto, but we were gratified. People liked the characters, they liked the setting, something about the tactility of the game, the really specific material detail in it that we worked so hard at researching and putting in. It spoke to people. There were some things emotionally that we knew were resonant with the main game, and that still had potential, that we still wanted to explore. And so sometimes we'll go emotionally. What's the emotion we want to invoke in our players? And how could that be different but still related to what you have in the base game? And in this case, it was the sea below. So I joined Still Wakes the Deep late in the project. I barely worked on the base game, and I got to see it from an outsider's perspective. And when I came in, I read all of the material I could. I read all of the scripts, I read the early drafts, I read some of the early pitches for the game. As the team was coming up with the idea for Still Wakes the Deep, one thing kept getting repeated over and over, and that is the North Sea has to be a character. It has to be something that feels dangerous, perilous, and actively menacing, right? So not just trying to, not just sort of a hazard, not just an environmental hazard, but something that feels like it's encroaching on you as time goes on. And in the base game, we had those opportunities. Kaz falls off the oil rig into the water. There's many other opportunities in which the player can fall off into the water and die. There's some opportunities to swim, but that feeling, that sense that the North Sea itself is a character that can not just kill you on the spot, but maybe can envelop you, suffocate you, terrify you, that was something we wanted to explore a bit more. And it was right around this time that on the internet and social media, things about the North Sea were really bubbling up to the surface. Now, in reality, the North Sea is one of the most commercially active seas that we have, bodies of water that exist. Loads of people make their living or live on or around the North Sea. It's a well-developed area, but it's also, like many bodies of water, sometimes a terrifying piece of evidence of nature at work. When you go below the surface, things change. Still Wakes the Deep is the story of the worst day in Cameron McCleary's life. You play as Kaz, as a horrific disaster is ripping through the oil rig that he works on. It's December of 1975, and the rig has drilled into something that maybe it shouldn't. You're running around the rig, finding a way of keeping things afloat, finding a way of saving your comrades, as something that you don't recognize and you don't understand is tearing them to pieces or turning them into something else. That's the story of the base game, and it takes itself all the way through to a conclusion. The story of Siren's Rest is set 10.5 years later, not from the perspective of anyone who experienced the events of Still Wakes the Deep. This is really important. You are playing a really different sort of person in a really different sort of time. It's the 80s now, and as far as everyone on the mainland knows, the BAFTA collapsed, sank into the North Sea without a trace, except for detritus. As a consequence of that, there was an inquiry, Cadal was held accountable, and they immediately went bankrupt. They're no longer on the scene. All of this is in the background of the story. But also, as far as the North Sea goes, it's evolved. It's advanced. It's a different, more global space than it used to be. There's different sources of oil. There's an effect that it's had on the UK as a whole and on many other countries. And what that effect is visible on the type of people that are now interacting with it, on the type of expeditions that are possible. You are playing as Mari. Mari is the lead of a deep sea saturation diving expedition. Now, saturation diving is not like scuba diving. It's not like snorkeling. It is a whole different ordeal. It is deep, it is all-encompassing, it is pressurized, and it is terrifying. Real people, every day, around this planet, are doing saturation dives. The more we researched about this, the more we realized just how terrifying this is, and just how useful this could be as a basis from which we can grow the next stage of the Still Wakes the Deep story. You are going to be floating in the detritus of what you believe to be the fallen, sunken rig, the BAFTA, as you are trying to put together what happened. As far as Mari knows, it just sank without a trace. All lives aboard lost. Can Mari bring a bit of dignity to those who perished there? Can she find something to record their passing, or to bring back a memento to their families, perhaps? Take an artifact of theirs, just understand more. It's rare for these types of expeditions to be funded, and they are expensive and they are serious. Mari has a limited amount of time, and she's here to do the best that she can. So when you open this game, you are descending down, down, down into the depths of the North Sea until you hit the seabed, and then you are floating out on an umbilical over to find whatever you can find. There are a lot of different ways that you can start off a game. And in our case, we really wanted to start off with the emotional core. What is it that we wanted players to feel from Still Wakes the Deep, Siren's Rest? And what we really wanted them to feel, above all, was a fear of the deep sea, thalassophobia. This sense that you are a small pinprick of light in the middle of this enveloping, crushing darkness. Could we make people feel that way? Well, we hope so, and we thought it was at least worth a try. There's other types of fears that people have. Fears of these looming metal structures in the deep, fears of what might exist, what might be breathing just behind in the shadow, where you can't quite hear. And we started to do research. We started to collect imagery of photographs people have taken deep under the sea. We started to read and listen to interviews of people who have gone farther and farther into the deeps. A lot of times the headlines that we get are of just explorers, general explorers, or of really high-profile research expeditions. But we started to learn very quickly, almost as a corollary to the research we had done about oil rigs, that there is a massive industry that happens at the bottom of the ocean floor. And it happens all over the planet. To this day, people are going 200 meters, 300 meters deep under the water and are doing the work that keeps our civilization running. They're fixing up the undersea cables. They might be working for a specific industry like oil or gas. They might be doing scientific research. The type of work they do is at such a level of danger that it's on par with astronauts doing spacewalks. But no one knows about it, or at least people don't tend to know about it as much. This is a crazy type of experience. And the more we researched, the more we learned about what regular people do in this actual world, the more we were like, this is great fodder for a game. This is great fodder not just for any game, but for the type of game that has the themes, the mood, the tone that the world of Still Wakes the Deep has. The question is, what characters do you populate it with? What is it that they want to do? And where are they going? So for me as a sort of narrative person, that was our in, right? So the team as a whole was thinking about, well, what imagery would really evoke the right type of feeling? What types of experiences would work that would give you a sense of that sort of looming depth and dread? And then my job started to be, how would we fill it? What's the story we would tell inside of here that still feels part of the overall weave of Still Wakes the Deep, but maybe uses different thread? There is a really different approach between the characters of Siren's Rest and the characters of the original Still Wakes the Deep. Take the original Still Wakes the Deep. The people that we meet here, for the most part, are oppressed in different ways. They're oppressed socioeconomically. Rennick is always telling them what to do. He's yelling at them. He's requiring them to do this or that. He's controlling where they can move, where they can go. He's banishing them. They have no course to appeal. They are oppressed by the work. The work is hard. It's taxing on the body. The people who are there, they've chosen to be there. It's taxing on their families. Many of them have families and yet are here over Christmas despite that. What's happening in their lives that's leading to that, that's requiring them to be able to have to do this type of thing? And of course, most obviously, they're physically oppressed by this creature that they encounter that is actively changing who they are, absorbing them, doing things to them that is both more intimate and more violent than anything that they've encountered so far. The characters there are operating from a position of weakness. Not that they themselves are weak. This is a really important distinction. But they are put in a position where they have limited knowledge and limited awareness and limited ability. As Kaz, you can do almost nothing, right? It's intentional that you have a screwdriver, you can pick up a spanner, you can throw some mugs around, but that's it. You aren't armed with an AK-47 and have a way of combating this type of creature. You have to work with what you have that's around you and use your wits. So in some ways, it's a game about how you can respond when you know nothing. Now, Siren's Rest is a very different sort of situation. These are characters who are opting in to a difficult situation. They are choosing to go to the wreck of the BAFTA and to understand what's happening in there. They are more empowered in various ways. They're trained. Mari has gone through university. She has established herself at a different social and economic level than many of the characters in the base game. She hasn't done that by accident, right? She's been interested in this, but she has some political clout. She has been running a charity on behalf of the families of those who died on the BAFTA for this past decade. She has been collecting money to fund this very expedition. She is a person of means. She is not wealthy, but she's finding a way to accomplish these types of goals, using institutions for herself, not just being used by them. She's also not alone. Neither is Kaz, of course. But Kaz is having to react on the spot, in a moment, to a situation he's not prepared for. Mari has a team with her, a diving team with her. People who know what it's like, who have done this many times before, and who are supporting her along the way. They don't know what they're going to find, but they've done this sort of thing before. Her team of Rob and Hans are her anchors. They are her connections to reality, to safety, to security, and to friendship. And those things are necessary for her to be able to make her way through this world. This is intentional, that we have two characters with really different types of approaches. The type of need that Mari has as a character from a narrative perspective is very different than the type of need that Kaz has as a character who's running from things and finally has to come to a conclusion about whether he's going to stop running and let go. I won't give away everything that Mari goes through, but that approach, the fact that they're different, but they're both coming to the physical structure of the BAFTA from different perspectives, now that is quite central to how we've designed this. We really wanted this story to be a foil to what you see in the base game. Still Wakes the Deep isn't just a horror game, it's a really specific type of horror game. It uses the subgenre of monster horror and of body horror. Those are really particular. They do different things. They're interested in very specific questions. What is the human form? What does it mean to still be yourself if something gets twisted and changed? Now with this game, when we thought about the environment and what it would feel, our characters, what Mari would be like, what her companions would be like, how it would feel to be swimming over a dark chasm and you don't know at all what's down below in the trench. This is a different type of horror that evokes. To us, it evokes paranormal horror, psychological horror. It's that constant pressure, not just the pressure on you to perform, the stress to do a good job, but the physical pressure of being cranked up to being 187 meters down below the surface of the water. When you read the interviews and you learn from saturation divers who've done this, the pain, the sense of half blacking out all of the time is always there on the surface. Every now and then they'll see something flitting in the darkness. They'll look at something and it'll look a little bit different when they look back a second time. You might not always be sure what's around a corner. These are real things that happen to people. Real games that your mind plays tricks on you with. When you are diving, if you go too far, everyone is familiar with the bends, a sort of incredible medical condition that can happen if you rise too fast, and it can be really, really dangerous, even fatal. But if you go too deep, you get you get something that is sometimes called the narcs. You feel like you are inebriated. You can't quite see what's going on. Your judgment gets impaired. The things you see might seem a little bit odd, might seem a little bit changed. You might forget some of your critical security procedures. Mari isn't just going through a space that is a graveyard under the sea, a haunted house really to explore through. She's going through it in a situation that puts her to the ultimate test. And how her mind responds, how she responds, is central to the story that we're telling here. Mari is not working alone. She's working with a team of experts. Her fellow diver, Rob, is from Fife, but has spent most of his career on the west coast of Scotland, working in the Firth of Clyde. The Firth of Clyde are some of the deepest waters around the United Kingdom, and it is filled to the brim with shipwrecks. Rob made his name exploring many of those very shipwrecks and doing it well. You brought him onto the team because he understands what it is to see a wreck. That being said, he's never seen a wreck this big. A whole oil rig? That's a different story. Hans, your dive support supervisor up on the surface. Hans is Norwegian. He grew up in Stavanger. He was a great hero to the unions over there, and has sort of come into his later career as a bit of an elder statesman of the North Sea. He's seen it all, he's done it all, and he's eager to find talent that care about the humans that work on the North Sea. That has always been important to him. And so when he found out that Mari was trying to fundraise for a humanitarian expedition here below the North Sea, he partnered with her and helped her find all the things that she needed, get the approvals that she needed, recruit people like Rob. Hans is a voice and is a source of stability for both of them. But Hans isn't down there, down below the sea with them anymore. Those years have passed. He's just a voice on the radio. Mari is from Scotland too. Mari grew up in the Hebrides and has gone to university at the University of Glasgow. And she was there when the wreck of the BAFTA happened. From that point on, she was obsessed with understanding what happened to these people on board, with the injustice of it all, that all these people who were doing the Christmas shift, no less, have sank down below the sea and no one will ever know their stories or what happened to them. Mari spent time speaking to the surviving family members. What were they like? What were their stories? Could she collate them? And in so doing, a desire started to grow in her. If Cadal was bankrupt, if no one else was going to go do it, if it was too expensive for everyone else, maybe if she worked hard enough, she could go down below the sea, the right way, the proper way, and find a way of giving these people the rest that they deserve and giving the families something more specific to hang their hats on, some way of remembering those that they have lost. That's more than just a headline in a newspaper, an outcome of an inquiry, something personal, something real. You could argue that the entire story of Siren's Rest is the story of someone who needs to have a drive to take her this far. But maybe when she gets to a certain point, she reaches a crossroads where that very same drive could lead to her doom. You know, when it came time to designing this game and the space that you would be in as a character, it was almost like that initial choice to set this game deep under the North Sea answered many of the questions that we would have had. We wanted to have the right emotional core, the right mood, something that felt like it was still part of the Still Wakes the Deep universe. But just by being deep under the sea and treating that with a little bit more realism, it gave us everything else. Because if you actually go that far deep under the sea and you are in the middle of all of the muck of a massive wreck, things like this, other objects that you are swimming through and moving amongst. You're hearing the creaking of the metal above you, and you're never quite sure if it's going to lead to something stabbing right near where you are. And you don't know if there's something there lurking, using it as shelter. The human, realistic survival requirements that you would have to be able to operate and work here under the sea are already putting you in such a precarious position. Let me give you an example. Mari is on an umbilical cord for when she's swimming. She's linked through this umbilical to the diving bell. The diving bell is a little oasis, a super small, incredibly tight space, barely bigger than the area that I'm sitting in now, that is the only source of air, of comfort, of a connection to land that exists. And on that umbilical comes everything Mari needs to survive. Radio contact, it's through a wired connection, right? So she's speaking to whomever is in the bell and whoever's up on the ship above her. That's it. She's getting heat. The North Sea, any sea, at this depth, is something like 2 degrees Celsius. It is cold. It's so cold that if you didn't have hot water flowing around you, like an athlete after an injury getting some sort of water therapy, if you didn't have anything like that, you wouldn't survive that much even on your own. And of course, oxygen. You can't survive without the air that's coming to you. And it is coming to you on an umbilical. You could not design a better metaphor for a narrative person, right? It is a real life thing, and it is the perfect metaphor. Because if something were to happen with that umbilical, and let's hope nothing happens to Mari like that at all, well, she would be in significant trouble. Even without touching on the environmental concerns, what it takes for a person to survive here is already pretty terrifying. Not to mention the nitrogen narcosis that people get exposed to all the time, where you start to feel a little floaty, a little inebriated, and you're not quite sure where you are or why any of these safety protocols really quite matter. Your judgment is impaired. Combine these two things and you have a pretty difficult cocktail. Speaking of cocktails, you can't even breathe normal air because the nature of that pressure changes what happens to normal gas. It's the same reason why people get the bends if they rise too high too fast. The reason it's called saturation diving is because you have become saturated fully by the nitrogen that has left your lungs and passed its way into your other bodily tissues. And if you rise incredibly fast, those bubbles will increase and could explode, sometimes even in really dangerous parts of the body. You have to slowly rise and off gas, allow your body to fully regulate itself before you can make your way back up. It's a dangerous situation to be in, and every single saturation diver knows just how dangerous it is. Speaking of that cocktail I was saying, that air you're breathing isn't just a matter of piping down normal air from the surface. For you to survive, you have to be breathing this thing that is often called heliox, a combination of helium and oxygen. And what it means is that in real life, actual saturation divers are speaking in almost Donald Duck style voice. They could barely understand each other if they weren't already used to this. The more research we did, the more we realized that actually saturation diving, whether in the petrochemical industry or in telecoms or in general scientific research, it is one of the most international professions that exist. There's people who are speaking Mexican accented English, Malaysian accented English, Norwegian accented English, all working together in the same space. For them to understand each other with these crazy voice modulations they have, sometimes they have to wear voice descramblers. So they're all walking around like Darth Vader in the middle of this tiny tin can where they all have to go and do their own work, and yet everything is designed almost to make you feel less human, to make you feel less connected to normal life up on the surface. It's a really specific type of person that is willing to put themselves through this, because it's not even just the things I've just described here. Very often, these saturation dives, they happen for weeks at a time, because the danger of rising and diving is so high that it's easier to just crank you up to the right pressure and have you just live in this environment. Even if you're physically up high, you're still at pressure as if you were 200 meters below the surface. Mari's situation is a bit different. She's working with a fellow Scot and a Norwegian. She can understand them a bit better, and we're taking some liberties with the story here, right? So if there's any actual saturation divers, we unfortunately haven't given our characters the heliox voice, and Mari has a longer umbilical than a real-life saturation diver might have. But beyond that, we're being relatively specific. It's really common when you play a game that's set under the water for things to feel light, floaty. You might be in a sort of diving suit, and maybe you can do sort of hops around on the water. We haven't been 100% realistic with what it would be like to actually work here. But our hope is that we are pretty close to it, that we are giving you a much more realistic sense of what it could feel like under that water. And then we don't have to add that much, because it is scary enough. If you can really imagine yourself being in this type of work, you'll start to question whether you'd want to do it yourself at all. Another fear that we think is so potent and so powerful is simply the fear of the deep sea, thalassophobia. When we were making this game, we surrounded ourselves with imagery of deep sea environments, being down under the water and sitting on the edge of a cliff, looking down below you into utter blackness below. Early in the game, there's a moment where you go out and you meet Rob, your fellow diver. And Rob is standing and he's looking down below a trench, trying to see if he can make anything out in the murk. And right at the beginning of the game, your job is to swim over that. We want to give you the sensation that something might move, something might come up, something might shift, and you have no idea, you have no context. We had a team member who had done a dive and swam over the wreck of a ship down below. And just the idea of being above something and feeling like there's an entire universe down there below you, that feeling sells itself, I think. Submechaphobia, thalassophobia, all of these things that happen that when the human is taken out of our natural environment and put into this very unusual, but yet really raw, really primitive space that is somehow where most of life on Earth exists, it changes the way you interact with it. And we hope it changes the players too. Siren's Rest isn't just continuing the narrative of the world of Still Wakes the Deep. We're also trying to push things in terms of what you do as a player. So by virtue of Mari being someone who is opting into this dive, she's choosing to come here. She's choosing to go down into the wreck. She can be a bit more prepared. She has a team, she has tools. And what that means is you as a player have a few more things that you can do compared to what Kaz might have been able to do. One of those things is to collect mementos. Another of those things is to take photographs. Why would you be doing either of these things? Well, that's because Mari's mission is to find evidence of those that fell to their deaths in the Beroshi, the people that no one has heard from ever since. The assumption is that they died here with the rig. Her assumption is that if she's lucky, she might be able to find some of them. Or if not, the bodies themselves. Perhaps she can find evidence of the life that was here, of the people who worked in a certain space or lived in a certain area. Something she could take, an artifact she could bring back to the families that are still grieving, still have an empty place at the dinner table. Can she find something that connects to them? And if she actually finds them, if she actually finds the bodies themselves, can she try to identify them? Well, it's 1986 now. Digital cameras are now a thing, including digital cameras that work at very deep levels of the sea. So Mari has a camera with her. Part of what she's going to be doing is trying to photograph whomever she finds. Gameplay-wise, we're pushing things as well. So Siren's Rest isn't just an expansion of the story. It's also an expansion of the tool set of the types of things you can do as a character. You'll be swimming through a lot of this game. You had a little bit of that in the base game. There'll be quite a bit more of that in this game. And as you're moving around, remember, you are playing as Mari, and Mari is on a mission. Her mission is to try to bring rest, bring evidence, understand what happened in the disaster 10.5 years ago, and particularly what happened to the people who died. So she's on the hunt. Can she find a memento of someone, something identifiable as having been used by or owned by or related to someone who died? Can she find their remains? If you as the player can find either of these things, You can bring something back with you. Perhaps the memento itself you can take with you. If you find some remains, you can photograph it using cameras that, now that it's 1986, actually work at this depth of the sea. And this is a lot of what you'll be doing across the game. It's a bit more of a forensic approach compared to what Kaz was able to do in his more panicked state. You are seeking out evidence at the human scale, but also evidence of what has happened overall. So as you're crawling through these broken corridors and these hallways, and as you're cutting through these welded doors, every time something falls past, there might be something to find. Pretty much every game we make at the Chinese Room, we care about authenticity. We do quite a lot of research for our titles. And that's true even for a title like this, which exists in a universe that we've already done work in. Because of course, time moves on. Things are not the same. It's 10.5 years since. It's the middle of the 80s. The environment that our characters are in is completely different. The experiences that they've had are completely different. That being said, this still needs to feel part of the same universe. So let's talk at first about the things that are different. The most obvious thing is the setting. Mari and Rob are deep under the sea. They are dealing with all of the details of survival under the sea, of a diving bell, of an umbilical cord, of oxygen, of heat, of nitrogen narcosis, of all of the dangers of being out here, of the crackle of the radio and of the sound that they might hear. So there's all the technological specificity of that we've really tried to put in. We try to make sure that the things that you see look like they would. But there's something different about this game. The very nature of what you're doing in this game is exploring the environment of the previous game. So players who are coming to this having played Still Wakes the Deep, they'll recognize things. They'll recognize spaces. They'll recognize structures. And we want to be honest and authentic to that as well, to the universe that we've created. When you see something in this game, it will have existed in the previous game. It will have served a purpose. You might recognize something that happened in a specific environment when you were playing as Kaz. What will Mari see when she gets to that environment? What's happened in these 10.5 years? Is something the same? Has it changed? Now, they won't look exactly the same. The wreckage is absolute. The spaces are whirled and twisted and destroyed into one another. But they're still fundamentally the modules that we know and love from the base game. Who inhabits them? What inhabits them? What do they look like? How do they feel? How embedded are they in the bedrock? So what Mari will find, what you will find when you go farther on down, we've tried to make sure that that too is honest and authentic and true, even as much as it is reflective of Mari's state of mind, of what she is able to experience the deeper she goes into Siren's Rest. What we really wanted to bring to this type of game is showing just how terrifying the real life situation could be. How scared you might be if you were someone who had come down to the bottom of the sea in as realistic of an environment as you could. It's not a place that humans belong, and yet it's a place that we still go to. And that realism isn't just in the umbilical cord or in how oxygen works or in the temperature. It's also in these little things. We spent a lot of time trying to think about how the sound would work. Now, in the base game, the sound was influenced by the weather, by where you were in the rig, and the way that sound travels through air is something that we all intuitively understand. The way sound travels through water, that's very different. The idea that you were on radio with someone, that bark of that 80s radio, what it would feel like, the crackle, what you would be like when you were in an entire universe inside of a helmet. And if you were to take that off, if that were to be separated from you, would you feel more isolated or less? What's the hiss that you should hear? What's the type of creaking or the type of sound of plastic on plastic you might hear just by moving around everywhere? One of the things that matters the most to us is being authentic to the Scottishness of the game. We have a really international team that work on this project. Our creative director grew up in Glasgow, is Scottish himself. I had a writing partner through much of this, one of the same writers that we had on the base game, a Scottish writer herself, Emma Beebe, who's absolutely wonderful, and has helped make sure that not just is it that the dialogue is Scottish, but it's specific to the people that we have. After all, Mari's from the Hebrides, Rob is from Fife, Hans is not from Scotland, he's from Norway. But when we have Scottish dialogue, it feels right to where these people were from and to the time period in which they exist. Because the type of Scots English that's spoken today is really different from what might have been the case before. We also really wanted to be authentic in the human voice that we've brought to this game. We cast really carefully and worked with an amazing set of actors. We have Lois Chimimba who plays Mari. We have Lauren McDonald, who plays Rob, and we have David Menken, who plays Hans. And we spent a lot of time together. Even though this is a game that's perhaps a bit smaller in duration than the base game was, we wanted to really imbue it with that same level of respect. So we've talked in detail with the actors about what the universe of this game is like, what roles their characters play. We had an amazing voice director in Kate Saxon who really helped us evoke the performance that we really needed. In fact, it's not normal to do it this way, but we recorded quite a lot of the dialogue between Mari and Rob with them both in the recording booth together. But we felt, since so much of this game is a dialogue between Mari and Rob, much of what you're doing, as you're exploring, you're commenting back to Rob, you're giving him a status update about what you're doing, and Rob is responding straight back to you. Yes, go here, don't go there. He's tracking where you are on the old blueprints of the BAFTA. Papers everywhere, trying to make sense of where you are, and there's no computers. It's 1986, right? No computers down below the sea. So to have these two actors, these two Scottish actors, in the booth together, contributing where they know that something could feel just a bit more authentic if we could say it just the right way, we really cared about that. It's really similar to the process that we did with the base game. And since we know that that worked well, we wanted to carry that forward into this one too. It's not just that. Even the music that we have, we've really put a lot of effort into. We will have released a trailer by the time that this goes out. And that trailer too features the vocal talents of Maggie McGuinness, an incredible performer who we were lucky to have in the base game, and who we have in this one too, slightly tweaking the type of Scots Gaelic that she gives us to fit with the themes of this game. We'll see if anyone who understands will be able to pick up where things are going. It's worth saying a little bit about the audio of the game. The audio of the game is really carefully thought out because the undersea environment is a really difficult challenge to reflect. You have these large, almost like low frequency sounds that are happening in the sea that are communicating to the player where they are, how dangerous the situation is. But you also have this incredibly precise up close response as well. An auditory sense of being embodied inside of this helmet, being stuck here, feeling your breath, hearing it reflect, hearing the crackle of the radio as you communicate to Rob back in the diving bell, trying to tease apart what sound you're hearing that's a danger and what sound you're hearing that is a source of information. We try to play with that a fair bit, not just in terms of the audio design, but also in terms of the actual literal plot of the game. What you hear at different points matters a huge amount. So we really tried to put a fair bit of focus on that. We hope that the players enjoy it. We are really proud of having won 3 BAFTAs for Still Wakes the Deep. Best New IP, Best Performance, Best Supporting Performance. Frankly, we think there could have been, for a game that we've been working on that we haven't even announced yet, for us it felt like there could be almost no better outcome. Because we're about to add to the IP, we're about to add to the performance, and we are about to provide a performance that we have given the same level of care and thought that we did to the base one. So we really hope that people will connect with it. But yeah, it feels like a fabulous platform to jump off of. We have many of the same people working on this project. It's different, right? It's a different set of characters. It's a different time. It's a different place. But we hope it's equally authentic to the environment that we had in the base game. You know, after Still Wakes the Deep came out, we gobbled up everything that we could. To this day, I still keep refreshing the subreddit for Still Wakes the Deep, and I see what art people have put out. I happen to be a big fan of the YouTube format, and there have been some amazing game analyses that have come out about our game. I find it fascinating to see this stuff. If only just to see what parts of the game have resonated with different parts of the audience. So much has stood out to me. There are things that the fans have brought up and have championed, let's say, that we have tried to put little nods to in this game too. I won't say too much more than that. I hope that fans will be able to discover what they find. But there's also a deeper element of this game, something that's resonated seemingly with quite a number of fans that I've noticed. There's one video in particular on YouTube that I've watched and rewatched a bunch of different times, where he's broken down the base game, and he's found that there are ways of interpreting Still Wakes the Deep at multiple levels of plot, essentially. That what is actually happening might not be exactly what it seems on the surface. It is a success for the title that it's able to engender that type of response. So when you go through and you experience this game, you are looking through the eyes of a character, a third-party character, so to speak. Someone who, when they see something, they are confirming or not confirming what you saw when you were playing as Kaz. If you go to the exact same place that Kaz went to, and you had seen something as Kaz, and now you see something as Mari, which of them is right? Are either of them right? Is there any single source of truth for two people whose minds might be quite addled by the experiences that they're going through? What really is it to be thinking in your right mind, if there is such a thing? I really wanted to play with those ideas in this title, because the very nature of the environment puts you in such a weird state of mind. And that is just happening through physics, right? It's just automatically happening in terms of how your brain chemistry works when you are at this level of pressure. Things appear, things flit around the corner. You look at something, you look away, you look back, and it looks different than it did before. If you, playing as Mari, see something that you saw when playing as Kaz, what does that mean for that thing? What does that mean for what had happened to the rig as a whole? What really is the answer to what occurred on the BAFTA in December of 1975? Can you trust either point of view? That has always interested in me. The sense that we are not just an omniscient player looking in an isometric view at this type of title. You are embodied in a very literal way in Kaz, in Mari. You are seeing the world through their eyes. You are hearing the things that they hear. You are experiencing the things that they do too, even as, to one degree or another, their own realities potentially crumble before them. For players who played Still Wakes the Deep and felt like they saw something beneath the surface, I will absolutely not confirm or deny what their interpretation is. But what I will say is that when it came time to writing and designing this game, Siren's Rest, we treated it as if you are doing a hike high up on a mountaintop and you're on a ridge, and that ridge is moving as the mountaintop itself curves left and right. But we need to make sure that the story doesn't fall necessarily on one side or the other. You're going to be seeing some things in this game that I think will fill in some gaps, but you'll also be seeing some new questions that get answered. Whether you'll come away, having played Siren's Rest, with really clear answers in your head, I'd be curious if you do. It might say more about what you need this game to do for you than anything else. Tell us if you have a sense of what's happening behind the surface, under the sea. I got to come onto this project after Still Wakes the Deep was really quite complete. So I got to approach it just like a fan would. But what that meant is, from the perspective of a creator, there are a number of directions that one could go in terms of what characters to add, what world to explore. The idea of going under the water, it felt full of possibility. And especially the more research we did, the more we learned about what the world was like. That felt really exciting for me. It's often the case, it's not always the case, but it's often the case that in games we often work with, let's say, elevated or escalated versions of reality. Even if you're making a game that is reviewed or is understood to be a relatively grounded game, all sorts of relatively unrealistic things might happen inside of them. One thing that's unique about the Chinese room is you can really pursue that sense of specificity and groundedness to a level that you wouldn't normally get in many other types of places. The environments matter, the specifics matter, the tools matter, the language matters. That felt really liberating, right? It felt really liberating to be able to do a bunch of research, to be able to say, hey, this is exactly the type of character that might exist. This is a real type of person. Here are loads of other examples of people like that. The research stage was super fun for this title. Design-wise, from a narrative design perspective, it also made for a very interesting structure. It's often the case when you are making a relatively linear game in which the story unfolds in cutscenes, let's say, and then there's gameplay in between there, and then there's another cutscene in which a big part of the story happens, and then some more gameplay. Increasingly, what you do is in that gameplay, you will, of course, add details and little bits and pieces that contribute. But the tentpoles, the anchors, the lighthouses, if you will be the cutscenes. In a linear game, that's often the case, right? So a lot of the writing time and effort goes into making sure that those cutscenes work really well. We have cutscenes in here too. We have longer sequences that are fully animated where you sort of carry the story through. But because the base design of this game was more open than Still Wakes the Deep was, it poses a different type of challenge. So the story needed to unfold more modularly, more organically. And therefore, it lends itself to a story that is a bit more like a jigsaw puzzle than a novel, or a matching game, if you will. You go to a certain place on this map, Mari notices something, she says something, Rob responds, and it adds to the history, to what they've discovered, to what they found. You've turned over that jigsaw piece that previously had been upturned. You go somewhere else, you discover something else. If you do enough of them, you might be able to draw yourself out a border of this story. If you don't do them, you should still get a jolt of narrative goodness every time you get some of those details, even more so because this is a game in continuity with Still Wakes the Deep. So you'll learn a bit more about maybe a character that you had seen before that was maybe only just a glancing mention in the base game, but now gives us a bit more detail. That should be interesting in and of itself. But it meant that we had to write this game modularly, that when you go into a place, it is infused with the spirit, so to speak, of the people who inhabited it, the people who lived and worked and maybe died there. You can actually get through a huge amount of this game and miss a vast amount of the specific content. I'm actually pretty proud of that. I love that we've put together a title where it can be really personal to the person, to the player, to the people who are experiencing it. They can go through this game focused on progression, focused on answering the core questions and get through it and get through the experience that Mari is having. Or they can go through in a more exploratory way, really taking their time, trying to turn over every single rock, look into every nook and cranny that they can, and they might find a little bit more. Both playthroughs are absolutely valid, and we want those both to work. We're proud of what we've done design-wise for this title. It's nothing impossible to do, absolutely, but for this title, for it to exist in the same universe as Still Wakes the Deep, but yet for you to be able to approach it differently, that combination felt really special to us, that you can have Siren's Rest living as something that a fresh player could come to and enjoy for the difference it offers, for the different experience it is, for the mood of being under the sea, without interrupting or deleting or obviating what you already have with Still Wakes the Deep. I think both of them hopefully should stand as two ways of interpreting a universe that is complex and unknowable. And to that end, our influences were a little bit different too. The type of games that we looked at as reference, the type of books and movies and artwork that we looked at as reference were a little bit different because we were producing something that's a bit changed. But in that sense, our process is probably similar to the process of many other games of this sort. We gather a bunch of reference, we understand what other games have done in this space, we understand what other parts of media have done in this space, and we really immerse ourselves in the context of our characters. We listen to the music they're listening to, we read the things that they're listening to, we try to understand what training they might have gone through in our case of sort of professionals coming into an area. And we hope that we can produce something that is original, but is familiar enough that people who have been consuming, let's say, pop culture for a little while, can say, oh, I see little bits and pieces here. I understand what type of story this is. And I really hope that's the case so that when we subvert it in this moment or in that moment, it hits that much harder. I came to the games industry later in my career, not until my 30s really. And I think maybe because of that, or who knows, maybe for some other reason, I sometimes think about it with a bit more distance than I might if it was the main thing or the only thing that I knew. One theme that often comes back to me is the difference between making art solo and making art as a group. Making art solo is done all the time. A lot of painting or visual art is done solo. Novel writing, poetry, music composition, all of that is solo. Group-based art, theater, filmmaking, game development, of course. These have different constraints on them. You have to operate slightly differently. You need to, because you want to produce what you're trying to produce, you have to bring together different types of talent, different types of experts. At the end of the day, we're just a group of people who all believe in this story and in this universe and want to share that with the rest of you. We hope that it can find the audience that it does. But we also want to engage in a dialogue. We're not only putting something out into the world for it to fritter away. We do art at this scale with the hope that we can contribute something to the medium. We can do something that hasn't been done before, and we can learn if it resonates, if there's something about this that worked for you, whether that's from a design perspective, from an artistic perspective, from a narrative perspective, or anything else, really. We're proud of what we've put together here, and we're proud of the opportunity that we even had. You don't always get those opportunities to continue with the universe that we care so deeply about. Do tell us. Tell us what worked for you. Tell us which parts have really stuck with you. Any imagery that sticks in your brain for weeks after you play the game. Any lines that you can't forget. any actions that felt weighty or full of consequence. We'd love to see what they are. I just hope people are going to love this game. I hope that people will find something in it that they like, and that they'll tell us about it, that they give us something to kind of work with. We just want to see how people engage with this universe. My name is Sagar Beroshi. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy Still Wakes the Deep, Siren's Rest.
Depth?
187 meters.
Pressure?
0.4 bar.
Reserve oxygen for the diving bell.
Both green.
Best if we keep our expectations low, Mary.
I just don't want to leave empty-handed. A decade in salt water has made its mark.
Take it nice and slow. No rush.
The comms are breaking up, Rob. I'm going to detach.
Absolutely not, Mary. We have no idea what's out there. Don't detach yet! This is an evacuation order!
God, how am I going to get out of here?
We never will, Mary.
No! Ah! Rob, there's something in here.